The communication room was silent except for the soft humming of advanced computer systems. Yuna stood at the back, watching as the station's top leaders prepared to receive a transmission from the Voth, an alien civilization that had recently made contact with human explorers. Dr. Roberts stood at the center of the room, his hands clasped behind his back. He looked important, but Yuna knew he was more concerned with looking powerful than understanding what was really happening. The main screen flickered to life. The Voth representative appeared, a tall, angular being with skin that seemed to change colors like a living canvas. Its eyes were large and seemed to look through everyone in the room, not just at them. "Humans of Earth," the Voth began, its voice a strange mix of electronic sounds and something that almost sounded like music. "We have observed your expansion into the Kepler frontier. Your presence is disruptive." Yuna watched carefully. While others listened to the words, she was studying the patterns of communication. Something felt off about the transmission. Dr. Roberts stepped forward. "We come in peace," he said, using the traditional diplomatic greeting. "We seek understanding and cooperation." The Voth representative's form shifted, turning slightly more blue. "Cooperation requires compliance," it responded. "Your species has a history of disrupting established galactic protocols. We will provide you with a single option." The room grew tense. Yuna could feel the other researchers holding their breath. "Your colonies must accept our migration restrictions," the Voth continued. "You will limit your expansion to specific sectors. You will follow our communication protocols. You will submit to our oversight." Dr. Kim, standing next to Yuna, whispered, "This is not a negotiation. It's a demand." Yuna's mind was racing. The Voth's communication was more than just words. It was a complex system of color changes, sound variations, and subtle body movements. Most humans would miss these details entirely. Dr. Roberts looked defeated. Yuna could see it in his shoulders, in the way he stood. He was ready to accept the Voth's terms. Most of the researchers around her seemed to agree. They saw no other option. But Yuna saw something different. She saw a communication system that was rigid, that couldn't adapt. The Voth believed they could control other species through strict rules and limitations. They saw communication as a way to control, not to understand. "If we do not comply," Dr. Roberts asked, "what will happen?" The Voth's form turned a deep dark red. "Isolation," it responded. "Complete removal from galactic communication networks. Your colonies will be cut off. No trade. No information exchange. No support." The threat hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Yuna could see the fear in the eyes of her fellow researchers. They were thinking about survival, about protecting what they had already built. But Yuna was thinking about something else. She was thinking about the patterns she had discovered, the strange signals that seemed to change and adapt, the communication methods that went beyond simple words. As the Voth representative finished its ultimatum, Yuna made a decision. She would not let these rigid beings control human exploration. She would find a way to break their system. The transmission ended. The room was silent. Dr. Roberts turned to the other researchers. "We will discuss our compliance," he said. Yuna simply smiled. They had no idea what was coming. The research station was quiet during the night cycle. Most researchers had gone to their sleeping quarters, tired from the day's tense discussions about the Voth's ultimatum. But Yuna was not most researchers. Her workspace was a controlled mess of holographic displays and custom-built equipment. Screens flickered with complex patterns of light and data. She had disabled the standard security protocols, creating a private workspace where no one could interrupt her work. Yuna understood something that others did not. Communication was more than just sending and receiving messages. It was about understanding the deep patterns that connected different forms of intelligence. She pulled up the signal recordings she had been studying for months. Most of her colleagues had called them random noise. But Yuna saw something else. These signals were alive. They changed. They adapted. Her fingers moved quickly across the holographic interface. She was building something new, an algorithm that could do more than just translate languages. This was a system that could understand the very structure of communication itself. "What are you doing?" A voice broke her concentration. Dr. Jae-sung Kim stood in the doorway. Unlike other researchers, he looked at Yuna with curiosity instead of judgment. Yuna didn't stop working. "I'm creating a new way of communication," she said simply. "The Voth think they can control communication by making strict rules. But communication is not about rules. It's about understanding." Dr. Kim walked closer, studying the complex patterns on her screens. "This is beyond current xenolinguistic theory," he said. "You're not just translating. You're trying to rewrite how different intelligences connect." She nodded. "Exactly. The Voth see communication as a way to control. But what if communication could be a way to truly understand?" Her algorithm was unlike anything created before. It didn't just translate words. It analyzed the deeper structures of how different beings thought. It could break down communication into its most basic parts and then rebuild those parts in new ways. Dr. Kim watched her work. He had always seen potential in Yuna that others missed. While most researchers were content to follow established methods, she was willing to completely change how people thought about understanding. "The station leadership will never approve this," he warned her. Yuna didn't look up from her work. "They don't need to approve it," she responded. "They just need to see that it works." Hours passed. The station continued its slow orbit around the distant planet. Most of the researchers slept, unaware that something revolutionary was happening in this small workspace. Yuna's algorithm began to take shape. It was a complex system of mathematical models, linguistic patterns, and adaptive learning protocols. If successful, it could do something no one had ever done before: create a truly universal method of communication. She thought about the Voth and their rigid communication system. They believed they could control other species by limiting how they shared information. But Yuna knew better. True understanding came from flexibility, from the ability to change and adapt. As the station's artificial dawn began to simulate sunlight, Yuna made a final adjustment to her algorithm. She knew what she was doing was risky. If she was wrong, she could lose everything: her position, her research, her chance to explore the universe. But if she was right, she could change everything. Dr. Kim watched her, a small smile on his face. "Ready?" he asked. Yuna looked up, her eyes bright with determination. "I was born ready." The research station's communication center was empty. Most systems were locked down after the Voth's ultimatum, with strict protocols preventing any unauthorized transmissions. But Yuna was not interested in following rules. Her fingers moved quickly across the hidden interface she had built into the station's main communication array. Dr. Kim watched nervously from the doorway, his eyes darting between Yuna and the corridor outside. "We could lose everything," he whispered. Yuna didn't look up. "We've already lost everything if we just accept their terms," she responded. The algorithm she had created was unlike any communication system ever developed. It wasn't just a translation tool. It was a living, breathing system that could adapt, learn, and reshape itself. Each line of code was carefully designed to break through traditional communication barriers. She began the transmission sequence. The communication array hummed to life, its usual blue lights shifting to a soft green that pulsed with an almost organic rhythm. On the screens, complex mathematical patterns began to form, not just numbers, but a kind of living language that shifted and changed with each millisecond. Dr. Kim stepped closer. "What exactly are you sending?" "Everything," Yuna said simply. The transmission was a quantum communication package that defied normal understanding. It contained mathematical models, linguistic patterns, and adaptive learning protocols. But it was more than just data. It was a challenge, a way of saying, "This is how we communicate. This is how we understand." Suddenly, alarms began to sound. Red warning lights flashed around the communication center. "We've been detected," Dr. Kim said, his voice tight with worry. Yuna remained calm. "That's the point," she replied. The transmission continued. It was designed to do more than just send a message. It was created to disrupt the Voth's communication systems, to show them that their rigid control was an illusion. Station security would be on their way soon. Dr. Kim knew this. Unauthorized transmissions were a serious violation, especially after the Voth's warning. They would be arrested. Their research would be destroyed. But Yuna kept working. The transmission reached a critical point. On the screens, the mathematical patterns began to change, to pulse with a kind of intelligence that seemed almost alive. It was more than a message. It was a complete reimagining of communication itself. Footsteps approached. Security officers were coming. Dr. Kim looked at Yuna. "Are you finished?" She pressed one final button. "Now I am." The door burst open. Two security officers rushed in, their hands on their communication restraint devices. But Yuna and Dr. Kim stood calmly, watching the screens as the final parts of the transmission completed. "Dr. Park," the lead security officer said, "you are under arrest for violating communication protocols and potentially compromising human-alien relations." Yuna turned slowly. A small smile played on her lips. "No," she said simply. "I just changed them." The transmission was complete. Whatever happened next would be different from anything anyone had expected. 3 days after the transmission, everything changed. Yuna sat in a small white room that felt more like a holding cell than an office. After her unauthorized communication attempt, station leadership had placed her under strict observation. But something was different. The usual tension had been replaced by a strange kind of anticipation. Dr. Kim entered the room, his face unreadable. "They're here," he said simply. "The Voth?" Yuna asked. He nodded. The Voth communication request came through unexpectedly. Most of the station's leadership expected anger, maybe even a complete communication shutdown. Instead, they received something entirely different. The main communication screen flickered to life. The Voth representative appeared, but something was wrong. Its color-changing skin moved in patterns that seemed confused, almost unstable. The usual precise language was gone, replaced by something that looked more like a conversation than a command. "Your transmission," the Voth began. "It is unusual." Yuna leaned forward. This was not how Voth typically communicated. Their previous interactions had been strict, controlled, filled with absolute statements. This felt different. This felt like a genuine attempt to understand. Dr. Roberts, who had been ready to punish Yuna just days ago, now watched the screen with wide eyes. The Voth were known for their rigid communication systems. They had controlled galactic communications for centuries. No one had ever seen them respond like this. "We have analyzed your communication package," the Voth continued. Its form shifted through colors. Blues, greens, soft purples that seemed to show confusion and curiosity. "It does not follow any known communication protocols." Yuma smiled. That was exactly the point. Her algorithm had done something unprecedented. It didn't just translate. It challenged the entire concept of communication. The Voth were used to controlling information, to setting strict rules about how different species could interact. Yuna's transmission showed them that communication could be something else entirely. "We wish to understand," the Voth said, and those words were revolutionary coming from their species. The station went silent. Researchers who had previously mocked Yuna's work now watched the screen with complete attention. Dr. Kim placed a hand on Yuna's shoulder, a quiet gesture of support. The Voth representative continued to change colors, a sign of internal processing that had never been seen before. It was as if Yuna's transmission had opened a window into their thought process, revealing something that had always been hidden. "Your method of communication," the Voth said, "suggests possibilities we have not considered." Those words meant more than they sounded. For a species that had controlled galactic communication for centuries, admitting there was something they had not considered was like an earthquake. Yuna understood what was happening. Her algorithm wasn't just a translation tool. It was a way of showing that communication could be adaptive, could change, could grow. The Voth's rigid system was being challenged at its most fundamental level. Dr. Roberts approached Una. Gone was the angry supervisor who had wanted to stop her research. Now, he looked almost respectful. "What exactly did you do?" he asked. Una looked at the screen, where the Voth representative continued to shift and change. "I showed them that rules are meant to be reimagined," she said simply. The transmission had worked, but this was just the beginning. The meeting room was unlike any diplomatic space humans had used before. Instead of a long table with fixed positions, the room had a flexible, shifting environment that seemed to change with each moment of conversation. Una sat at the center, surrounded by representatives from both human and Voth delegations. Her algorithm had made this meeting possible, but now she needed to prove its true value. The Voth representative, named Krell, a detail that surprised everyone who knew their typically impersonal communication style, shifted colors as it spoke. Its form was no longer rigid. It moved, changed, adapted. "Your method of communication," Krell said, "challenges everything we understand about interspecies interaction." Una remained calm. "Communication is not about control," she responded. "It's about understanding." Dr. Kim watched from the side of the room. He had seen Una grow from a young researcher with crazy ideas to someone who was literally changing how different species talk to each other. The room itself was a marvel. Walls that could change transparency. Surfaces that could display information in multiple ways. It was designed to be as flexible as the communication method Una had created. "Explain," Krell requested. It was not a demand, but a genuine request for understanding. This alone was revolutionary. Una began to demonstrate her algorithm. On the room's surfaces, complex patterns appeared. Mathematical models danced alongside linguistic structures. Images formed and reformed, showing how communication could be a living, breathing thing. "Traditional communication is like a locked door," she explained. "My algorithm is a key that can change the lock itself." Human diplomats looked confused. Voth representatives looked intrigued. Dr. Roberts, who had once tried to stop her research, now watched with a mix of pride and disbelief. Krell's color changed to a deep blue, a sign of deep processing that no human had ever seen in a Voth before. "You are suggesting that communication is not fixed," it said, "that it can adapt, change, grow." "Exactly," Una responded. The demonstration continued. Una showed how her algorithm could take the same basic information and translate it in ways that preserved not just words, but context, emotion, and cultural nuance. It was more than translation. It was true understanding. One of the human diplomats spoke up. "This changes everything about how we interact with other species." Krell's form shifted again. "It changes how we understand intelligence itself." The meeting was supposed to last hours. It went on for days. Researchers, diplomats, and scientists from both species worked together, using Una's algorithm as a bridge. Dr. Kim approached Una during a break. "Do you understand what you've done?" he asked. Una looked at the room, at the Voth and humans working together in ways that would have been impossible just weeks ago. "I'm beginning to," she said with a small smile. The diplomatic meeting was more than just a discussion. It was a demonstration of how communication could break down barriers, how understanding could replace control. Krell approached Una one last time before the day's session ended. "You did not just create a method of communication," it said. "You created a method of connection." Una understood now that her work was about more than just language. It was about bringing different forms of intelligence together, about showing that true understanding was possible. 6 months after the first diplomatic meeting, the universe looked different. Una watched from the observation deck of the research station as Voth and human ships worked together. Their designs, once completely separate, now showed signs of shared understanding. Smooth curves merged with angular structures. Technologies that were once incompatible now complemented each other. Her communication algorithm had changed more than just how species talked. It was changing how they thought. The Voth's internal systems began to shift. Their once rigid social structure started to become more flexible. Researchers who had been confined to strict roles now moved between different areas of study. Information flowed more freely. Ideas were no longer locked in place. Dr. Kim joined her at the observation deck. "You've started something big," he said. Yuma nodded. She understood now that her work was about more than communication. It was about showing that intelligence could be adaptive, that rules were not walls, but starting points. Research centers across human and Voth territories began implementing parts of her algorithm. It wasn't just a translation tool anymore. It had become a way of thinking, a method of understanding that went beyond simple language. On the screens around the observation deck, data streams showed the changes. Voth scientific publications became more open. Human exploration teams received more support. The strict borders that had once divided species began to blur. Krill, the Voth representative who had first engaged with Yuna, appeared on a communication screen. Its colors moved in patterns that showed excitement, something that would have been impossible before. "Your method continues to transform our understanding," Krill said. Its voice was different now, more nuanced, more alive. The algorithm had revealed something fundamental. Communication was not about sending messages. It was about creating connections, about finding ways to understand each other. Research stations that were once divided now worked together. Human scientists studied alongside Voth researchers. Ideas moved freely, like water finding its own path. Dr. Roberts, who had once tried to stop Yuna's research, now led a new interdisciplinary team. Their goal was to continue developing the communication approaches Yuna had started. "We were wrong," he told Yuna during a recent meeting. "We thought communication was about control. You showed us it's about connection." The changes were not just scientific. They were social, cultural. The way different species understood each other was fundamentally changing. Yuna looked at the star map. Areas that were once marked as restricted now showed collaborative research zones. Exploration routes that were once separate now intersected. Dr. Kim understood what she was thinking. "You didn't just create a new way of talking," he said. "You created a new way of existing." Krill's communication screen continued to show complex color patterns. "We are learning," the Voth representative said. The words meant more than they had ever meant before. Yuna smiled. This was just the beginning. Communication was not a fixed thing. It was alive. It could grow, change, become something new. The universe was bigger and more connected than anyone had ever imagined. And it all started with understanding that rules are not walls. They are invitations to something more. Years passed. The universe looked different now. Yuna stood on the edge of a new research station. This was not like the old stations. It was a place where different species worked together, where communication was not about rules, but about understanding. Dr. Kim had retired, but his spirit lived on in the work they had started. Krill, the Voth representative who had first understood her work, now led a joint research initiative that would have been impossible before. The communication algorithm had become more than a tool. It was a way of thinking about the universe. Young researchers from different species worked side by side. Humans, Voth, others that had been discovered since her first breakthrough. They spoke different languages, came from different worlds, but they understood each other in a way that was deeper than words. Yuna watched a group of young scientists. A human researcher discussed a complex theory with a Voth student. Their conversation moved like a dance, ideas flowing back and forth, changing, growing. She remembered the days when such a scene would have been impossible, when species were separated by walls of misunderstanding, when communication was about control, not connection. Krill approached her. Its form was different now, more fluid, more alive. "You changed everything," it said. Yuma smiled. "We changed everything," she corrected. The research station was a living thing. Walls that could shift, spaces that could adapt, technology that seemed to breathe with possibility. It was a physical representation of the algorithm she had created, flexible, alive, always changing. A young researcher, A mixed-species student with human and Voth ancestry walked up to Yuna. "We're studying your original work," the student said. "It's different from what we do now, but it was the beginning." That was the beauty of what she had created. It was not a fixed thing. It was a starting point, a way of thinking that could always grow, always change. The universe had become smaller and larger at the same time. Different species explored together, shared knowledge, understood each other in ways that went beyond simple communication. Yuna thought about the young researcher she had been, the person who didn't fit in, who saw possibilities where others saw walls. "What's the most important thing about communication?" the young student asked. Yuna looked out at the stars, at the ships from different species moving together, at the research station that represented everything she had fought for. "The most important thing," she said, "is understanding that we always have more to learn." Krill's colors shifted, a sign of agreement that would have been impossible when they first met. The day continued. Research happened. Discoveries were made. But something fundamental had changed. The universe was no longer a place of separate parts. It was a connected system, the living, breathing thing that could always grow, always change. Yuna had not just created a way of communication. She had shown that understanding was possible, that rules were not walls, but invitations to something more. And the universe was listening.